Hi, this is our ongoing podcast on the Garden of Eden, part of the series on Midrash as a psychological backstory to the Bible. And this one is entitled, Why Did God Want to Withhold Wisdom from Mankind? After all, we talk about, the tree of knowledge. Does God for some reason not want us to have access to knowledge? So the simple answer is, this was the tree of knowledge of good and bad. Give it its full title and then you get the full impact. In other words, before eating from the tree of knowledge, actually Adam and Eve had a sort of superior knowledge. They had their sights set on doing God's will. Once they ate from it, then they come across the same confusion that we live under. Like, what is right and wrong? What is good and evil? All this is now something that you have to deal with. So the simple answer is, it's not wisdom that was withheld from man, it's confusion. Now this is beautifully described in another piece from, as I said, the Midrash, which is a psychological backstory to the Bible, and it is given in this sort of allegory where there are four character traits discussing with God whether man should even be created or not. So what are those character traits? Loving kindness, truth, righteousness, and peace. Now, loving kindness and righteousness voted for the creation of mankind. They said, yes, this creature, Adam, that you will create, will engage in loving kindness and righteousness. So why not? Let's go for it. But truth and peace said, I'm sorry, but this Adam and Eve and all of mankind will not be truthful. So I vote against it. And peace, of course, said they'll probably be at war all the time. There's not going to be peace. So what did God do? Very startling, according to the oral tradition. God took truth and threw it to the ground. And the angels protested. They said, you're throwing truth to the ground? Isn't that your seal, God? Your seal is truth. And of course, the answer, which we won't discuss so much now, is that it's based on something in Psalms 85:12 that says, truth springs up from the earth. In other words, truth hasn't been thrown away. It's not out of the picture. It's something that will organically come back into mankind, because it's there, it's out there, they will recognize it. So let's get back to this parable. It seems to tell us that God already anticipated some kind of compromise in order to make the world work with human beings. They're not going to be perfect. They're not angels. They're not going to be truthful, and they're not going to be at peace. But they have this potential of loving kindness and righteousness. All this, of course, is another way of, discussing what we've said so many times, is that the modus operandi of this world is, tests and setbacks and suffering, so that we learn and grow, and we do acts of loving kindness and righteousness, and we hopefully will learn to live more truthfully and with more sense of peace and harmony. So last thing I'd like to mention in this podcast is, you of course have a story written in the Bible about what actually transpired between the serpent and Eve. And the very last sentence, I'm going to put it on the screen, and as I put it on the screen, I'm actually going to read from you what the Midrash, the oral tradition, how it actually reinterprets it. Here's a non-literal translation. And the woman understood that eating from the tree is the right thing to do. It will bring delight to God and boost my intelligence, which is God's will. She ate it and explained the logic to Adam, who also ate it. In other words, what this oral tradition is saying is that the only way the serpent could get Eve to eat from the forbidden fruit and then give it to her husband is if he could convince her that it is actually God's will. In other words, they were at the state before they ate from the forbidden fruit to only focus on God's will. And so the serpent made this argument, God wants you to expand your horizons. Yes, you have all kinds of character traits, which I mentioned before, including some, not being at peace all the time and not telling the truth, but these are all part of you. You need to embrace all of them and make them all part of you. And also, you are the pinnacle of creation. If you don't take up this offer and experience this new world that you could have just by eating this fruit, God may say, you know what? You didn't really live up to what I wanted for you. I'm going to have to create have to do another act of creation. Someone will usurp you and who will take the challenge. So all these arguments, according to oral tradition, is what the serpent used to get Eve to eat from the forbidden fruit, so that they were actually experiencing life to the fullest and doing, most importantly, what God wanted. And of course, we said that the serpent was the craftiest animal in the animal kingdom, and here you see it. It honed in on the way Eve thinks, that wants to do God's will, and says, fine, within that way of thinking, I'm going to alter her kind of moral compass. I'm going to corrupt it, and of course was successful. So you might ask, what was the purpose of God creating such a lofty creature which was destined to fail? The answer is twofold. Number one, at least it's in our DNA. We know what it means to have been a creature of highest consciousness, and we can always strive for that because it's part of us. We were there. We can try to get back there. That should be our goal. And secondly, as I said, this is the way the world is meant to be, with all the trials and tribulations and struggles and setbacks, so we can grow and learn. As I've said many times, this is really the way the world was meant to be. Hope you enjoyed these 3 podcasts on the Garden of Eden. See you next time.